Some people think stealing electricity is harmless until the bill comes due at 3:12 in the morning. The inverter screamed before my eyes even opened. A sharp electronic whine cut through the darkness of my bedroom like a smoke detector buried inside the walls. Then came the vibration from my phone against the nightstand. Motion alert. Backyard access gate. I rolled over, heart already pounding before I even unlocked the screen. The blue glow from the security app lit up the ceiling while the stale smell of solder flux and machine oil still hung in the air from the repair job I'd finished earlier that night. At first, all I saw was darkness and the shimmer of my solar panels reflecting moonlight. Then the camera adjusted. White Tesla, driver's side door hanging open. Extension cable stretched across the grass like a black snake. And standing beside it in a silk robe and expensive running shoes was Diane Holloway, president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, plugging her Tesla directly into my backup solar grid for the fourth night in a row. I just stared at the screen for a second, listening to the low mechanical hum coming from the inverter room downstairs. You know that moment when you realize somebody's been treating your property like it belongs to them for so long they stopped hiding it? That's what this was. No mask, no hositashchen, no fear. Diane moved around my backyard like she owned the place. She even used the HOA master key to unlock the utility gate I'd specifically installed after the second time my power usage mysteriously spiked overnight. The crazy part wasn't the theft. It was the confidence, the entitlement, the way she casually brushed her blonde hair behind one ear while checking her phone as thousands of watts flowed out of my battery wall and into her $80,000 Tesla. The soft clicking sound of her charging cable locking into place echoed through my phone speaker. Then my system warning flashed red across the screen. Unauthorized load detected. Battery drain critical. I sat up slowly, rubbing sleep from my eyes while the smell of hot circuitry drifted faintly through the air vents. Outside, Texas wind pushed dust against the windows, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked once before everything went quiet again. Willow Creek Estates always looked peaceful at night. Perfect lawns, decorative street lamps, matching mailboxes. But underneath all that fake suburban calm was a neighborhood run by people like Diane Holloway. People who smiled at HOA meetings while quietly making your life miserable behind paperwork and violation notices. Diane had hated me since the day I moved in 6 months earlier. Maybe it was the work van parked in my driveway. Maybe it was the tool racks in my garage. Or maybe she just couldn't stand a blue-collar electrician building his own off-grid solar system in her carefully controlled little kingdom. Industrial eyesore. That's what she called my panels during the first HOA meeting. Funny thing is, she drove a Tesla with a vanity plate that literally said green one. I remember sitting there in that freezing community center while she smiled over her clipboard and explained how my battery wall might affect neighborhood aesthetics. Meanwhile, she was secretly siphoning power off the same system every chance she got. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it hadn't started costing me money. My electric logs told the story before the cameras ever did. Every morning around 4 a.m., my reserve batteries dropped 20%. At first, I blamed the transfer switch, then the inverter, then maybe a bad lithium cell somewhere in a bank. I spent 3 weekends crawling through wiring conduits and checking breakers before I finally realized the power wasn't disappearing. It was being stolen. And once I installed thermal cameras around the side yard, the truth lit up like fireworks. Diane Holloway had been plugging her Tesla into my grid while the neighborhood slept. Night after night, week after week. But what Diane didn't know was that I'd already stopped trying to catch her. I moved on to something smarter. Downstairs, hidden behind the steel utility door in my garage, my upgraded system was already armed and waiting. Every voltage fluctuation, every unauthorized draw, every second of camera footage, recorded, logged, time-stamped. I watched Diane glance nervously toward my dark house before she bent down beside the charging cable again. The inverter screamed louder this time, a high-pitched metallic howl vibrating through the walls like the system itself was warning her to stop. But Diane just kept charging her Tesla anyway. And that's when I smiled for the first time all week. People hear the word electrician and think extension cords and ceiling fans. They do not picture a 42-year-old guy sitting cross-legged on a concrete garage floor at midnight rebuilding a solar inverter while old country music crackles through a dusty radio. But that had been my life for the last 6 months. Quiet, mechanical, predictable. After the divorce, predictable felt like oxygen. Chloe stayed with her mom during the week and came to my place every other Friday. So when I bought the house in Willow Creek Estates, I was not chasing luxury. I was chasing stability. The place itself was nothing special. Single-story ranch house, faded brick, 2-car garage with enough room for my tools and battery bank. But the backyard got direct Texas sunlight nearly 11 hours a day, and the second I saw that, I knew exactly what I wanted to build. My own independent solar microgrid. No outrages utilities. No depending on rolling blackout warnings every summer. Just clean power and enough backup storage to keep the lights on when the rest of the block went dark. The first month after moving in smelled like sawdust, hot wiring insulation, and fresh concrete anchors. I spent every evening on a ladder mounting panels while sweat soaked through my work shirts and mosquitoes hovered around the floodlights. Chloe helped me label breakers with a black marker one Saturday afternoon while eating popsicles on the garage floor. She thought the battery wall looked like something from a spaceship movie. Honestly, she was not wrong. 32 lithium cells lined up inside matte black steel cabinets with cooling fans humming softly behind them. It became our little project, our reset button. Then Diane Holloway noticed it. I still remember the sound of her heels clicking across my driveway the first time she came over. Sharp, fussed, impatient. She stood there wearing white tennis clothes, so clean they looked untouched by reality, staring up at my solar panels like I had parked a junkyard on the roof. Her perfume mixed with the smell of fresh asphalt baking under the Texas sun. These installations were not approved by the architectural committee, she said, holding a clipboard against her chest like a police badge. I told her every permit had already been signed by the county. Every inspection passed. Every wire compliant with state code. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. Community harmony matters more than technical legality, Mr. Mercer. That was Diane in a nutshell. She did not care what the law actually said. She cared about control. And from that moment on, every week brought another violation notice taped to my mailbox. Unauthorized commercial vehicle. Excessive garage activity. Visual disturbance from reflective surfaces. One time she cited me because my work boots were visible beside the front porch. Meanwhile, every night around 3 in the morning, her Tesla quietly drank electricity from the same solar system she claimed was ruining the neighborhood. The strange part was how normal Diane acted during the daytime. Every morning around 8:30, she would cruise through Willow Creek in that spotless white Tesla with her sunglasses on and one hand draped over the steering wheel like she was campaigning for mayor of suburbia. Sprinklers hissed across perfect green lawns while she rolled slowly past driveways, looking for violations the way vultures circle roadkill. Sometimes I would catch the faint smell of her expensive perfume drifting through the open garage while I worked on a panel array or rewired battery relays. 10 minutes later, another warning letter would magically appear on my front door. One afternoon, I came home from a service call covered in attic insulation and sweat, and there she was standing in my driveway beside my work van with her clipboard tucked under one arm. The Texas heat shimmered off the pavement hard enough to blur the edges of the houses across the street. Diane pointed at my ladder rack like she was presenting evidence in court. Commercial equipment cannot remain visible for extended periods, she said. I looked at the van, then at the ladder, then back at her perfectly manicured face. It is a work van, Diane. It carries tools. That is kind of the whole point. Her smile tightened instantly. Your tone is becoming aggressive again, Mr. Mercer. Aggressive. That word always showed up when somebody like Diane ran out of actual arguments. I noticed her eyes drifting past me toward the garage where the inverter display glowed soft blue against the back wall. She stared at it for half a second too long. That was when the first real suspicion hit me. She did not hate the system. She wanted access to it. A few nights later, I confirmed it by accident. Around 2 in the morning, I walked downstairs for water and heard a faint metallic click outside. Not loud, just enough to cut through the hum of the cooling fans. I checked the utility monitor mounted beside the kitchen. Power draw spike. 42 amps. My stomach tightened immediately. Nobody was supposed to be pulling power from the backup grid at that hour. I stepped onto the back patio barefoot, warm concrete pressing against my feet while dry wind rustled through the cedar fence. At first, everything looked still. Then I saw it. A thick black extension cable running beneath the utility gate and disappearing toward the neighboring property line. The cable was gone by sunrise. So was Diane's Tesla. But the tire tracks remained in the dust beside the fence, illuminated gold by early morning sunlight. After that, little details started connecting themselves together. The utility gate latch kept showing fresh scratches. My battery reserve dropped only on nights when Diane's Tesla sat outside, instead of inside her garage. And every single time the neighborhood experienced a rolling outage warning, her car somehow stayed fully charged. She thought she was clever because she used the HOA master key to access the maintenance corridor behind my property. That key opened irrigation panels, utility locks, and electrical gates across the subdivision. Diane treated it like a crown jewel. The problem was she had started believing rules only applied to other people. And people like that always get careless eventually. Once I knew Diane was stealing power, I stopped sleeping normally. Every little sound in the house started meaning something. The soft ping from the inverter monitor downstairs. The crunch of tires rolling slowly past my driveway after midnight. Even the cooling fans inside the battery cabinet sounded different once you realized somebody else was draining the system while you slept. I turned into the kind of man who checked energy logs before checking the weather. 3 nights later, another power spike hit at exactly 2:53 in the morning. I was already awake this time, sitting at the kitchen counter with cold coffee and my laptop open beside me. The entire downstairs smelled faintly like warm dust and electronics from the inverter room. On the monitor, I watched the battery reserve suddenly drop 12% in less than 7 minutes. That was impossible under normal household load. Then came the camera notification. Utility corridor motion detected. I opened the live feed, and there she was again. Diane moved carefully this time, glancing over her shoulder before unlocking the maintenance gate with the HOA master key hanging from her wrist on a gold lanyard. Her Tesla sat backed into the side alley with the charging port already open, white paint reflecting moonlight like polished bone. The extension cable disappeared into the shadows beside my fence line. She had done this enough times to develop a routine. That was the moment I stopped feeling angry and started feeling curious. Because normal people do not risk trespassing charges just to save $20 on electricity. There was something bigger underneath it. The next morning I drove over to Walter Briggs' place 3 streets down. Walter was 70 years old, retired utility lineman, built like an old oak tree with grease permanently embedded in his hands. His garage smelled like cedar wood, pipe tobacco, and motor oil that had soaked into the concrete sometime during the Reagan administration. When I mentioned Diane Holloway, Walter gave a slow laugh and shook his head before even setting down his coffee mug. That woman's been gaming systems her whole life, he said. Arizona, Nevada, now here. I looked up from the paperwork spread across his workbench. What paperwork? Walter slid an old newspaper clipping toward me. Diane and her husband used to live outside Phoenix. According to the article, residents accused their HOA board of unauthorized utility billing and misuse of maintenance access codes. Nothing criminal ever stuck, but the board quietly dissolved 6 months later. The article smelled old and dusty, edges yellowed from years inside a filing cabinet. Walter leaned closer, lowering his voice. People around here think she runs this neighborhood. Truth is, she survives because everybody's scared of paperwork and lawyers. That hit harder than I expected, because he was right. Diane never yelled, never threatened directly. She buried people slowly under violation notices, late fees, compliance hearings, and certified letters with legal wording most homeowners barely understood. Fear by bureaucracy. That was her real weapon. Over the next week, I started documenting everything. I mounted thermal cameras beneath the roofline, installed secondary load meters inside the transfer switch cabinet, added timestamp overlays to every security feed. Every night, the system recorded another unauthorized draw, sometimes 30 kilowatt hours, sometimes 50, enough electricity to run an entire small house. The footage became almost surreal after a while. Diane sneaking through the side corridor in silk running jackets and expensive sneakers while cicadas buzzed in the dark Texas heat. Her Tesla quietly humming while my batteries drained into it. Once she even paused to water flowers beside the fence while actively stealing electricity from my grid. That level of entitlement almost impressed me. Then things escalated. 2 violation notices appeared in my mailbox on the same morning. One claimed my solar panels caused excessive reflective glare. The other accused me of unauthorized electrical modifications, creating community hazard potential. I stood there at the curb reading them while the smell of fresh-cut grass drifted through the subdivision and sprinklers clicked rhythmically across the lawns. Diane's Tesla rolled slowly past at that exact moment. She lowered the passenger window, just enough to smile at me, over oversized sunglasses. Some systems become unstable when they are overloaded, Mr. Mercer, she said softly. Then she drove away. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner while the paper crinkled in my fist. That was not a warning about the HOA anymore. That was her telling me she knew exactly what she was doing to my power grid. And somehow she still believed I was the one without control. The strange thing about smart people is they usually think nobody else is paying attention. Diane Holloway definitely believed that. Once she realized I knew about the power theft, she did not back off. She escalated. The next week, turned my mailbox into a daily delivery system for harassment. Unauthorized battery modifications. Una prueba de exterior waiting. Excessive nighttime illumination from inverter indicators. One violation notice actually claimed the low hum from my cooling fans created psychological disturbance within the community environment. I stood in my driveway reading that sentence while a landscaping crew 2 houses over blasted gas leaf blowers loud enough to shake windows. The hypocrisy almost made me laugh. Almost. But underneath the ridiculous paperwork was something more deliberate. Diane was trying to establish a record. A paper trail. If my system ever failed or caused neighborhood issues, she wanted official complaints already sitting in HOA files. That realization settled into my stomach like cold lead. She was not just stealing electricity anymore. She was setting up protection for herself. I spent the next several days buried in documentation. My dining table disappeared beneath utility records, load reports, thermal images, and security screenshots. The smell of printer toner and stale coffee took over the whole downstairs while cooling fans hummed steadily from the inverter room. Every unauthorized charge session got logged down to the exact minute. Voltage fluctuation, battery discharge rate, camera timestamps. I even started photographing the extension cable tracks left behind in the dirt beside the fence after she removed them. Each morning, Chloe noticed it first when she came over that Friday night. "Dad," she said quietly while staring at the paperwork stacks, "this is starting to look like one of those crime documentaries Mom watches." I looked at the red security lights glowing softly across the backyard through the kitchen window. "That is because criminals hate cameras, sweetheart." She laughed at that, but only for a second. Then her expression changed. "You're not going to do something crazy, right?" That question stayed with me all night. Because honestly, part of me wanted to march straight into the next HOA meeting and expose Diane in front of the whole neighborhood. But people like Diane survive public confrontations. They twist them, weaponize them. The second you lose your temper, you become the unstable guy with too many tools in his garage. So instead, I stayed patient, quiet, methodical. Walter Briggs helped more than he probably realized. Every evening around sunset, I would walk over to his garage while cicadas screamed from the oak trees and the air smelled like hot pavement cooling after another brutal Texas day. Walter would sit beside an old metal fan drinking iced tea while I updated him on the newest violation notices. He listened without interrupting, then finally leaned back in his chair one night and said something I never forgot. "Jack, utility theft is not the real story here." I frowned. Then what is? Walter pointed toward Willow Creek Estates outside the open garage door. Control. Diane does not care about the electricity. She cares if she can take something from you and still make you feel like the criminal. That hit harder than any violation notice ever had. Because he was right. Every fake complaint, every midnight charging session, every smug smile through her Tesla window. It was all built around the same idea. She thought the rules only mattered when they protected her power. 3 nights later, another unauthorized load alert hit my phone at exactly 2:41 in the morning. But this time something changed. Diane stayed connected longer than usual. Much longer. I watched the live energy graph spike harder than ever before while the inverter. Fans screamed loud enough to vibrate through the walls upstairs. 48 amps. 52. 57. My backup batteries were draining fast. Too fast. Then another warning flashed across the monitor in bright amber letters. Grid isolation limit approaching. I felt my pulse slow instead of speed up. Because for the first time since this whole mess started, I realized Diane had finally crossed from annoying into reckless. She was no longer sneaking electricity. She was actively overloading a private solar backup system she did not understand. And people who play games with electrical systems without understanding them eventually trigger consequences all by themselves. I sat quietly in the dark kitchen, listening to the rising whine of the inverter downstairs while moonlight spilled across the floor tiles. Then I opened my laptop and started building something new. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in almost 3 years. Not because I was tired, because I finally understood exactly how Diane Holloway was going to destroy herself. I knew my garage looked less like a workshop and more like a command center. Battery schematics spread across the workbench beside half-empty coffee cups and thermal printouts. Cooling fans pushed warm air through the room, carrying the smell of solder, dust, and heated plastic insulation. Outside, Texas sunlight hammered the solar panels hard enough to max out charging capacity before lunchtime. Perfect conditions. I spent 6 straight hours rebuilding the software side of my backup system. Not to hurt anybody, not to sabotage anything, just to make the system finally behave exactly the way it was legally designed to behave when unauthorized loads threatened grid stability. That distinction mattered. A lot. There is a difference between setting a trap and letting somebody trigger security protocols through their own bad decisions. Diane never understood that difference because people like her confuse consequences with persecution. Around 3 in the afternoon, Walter stopped by carrying a box of donuts and took one look at the cables hanging from my inverter cabinet. "You building a spaceship in here, Jack?" He asked. I laughed for the first time all week. Just teaching the system some manners. He set the donuts down beside the monitoring station and studied the live diagnostics glowing across the screen. "You are not doing anything illegal, right?" "Nope." I pointed at the display. "Industrial isolation mode. Same thing hospitals and data centers use during unstable external loads. If somebody tries drawing unsafe power from outside the approved circuits, the system disconnects automatically." Walter stared for a second before slowly smiling into his coffee cup. "So the system protects itself." Exactly. That evening I installed the last piece. A silent remote alert tied directly into the utility monitoring app. If the battery wall detected another unauthorized overnight pull, the system would automatically timestamp the event, isolate the grid, preserve all camera footage, and notify the utility company of suspicious external load behavior. Completely legal, completely automatic, completely documented. The funny thing about electricity is it does not care about arrogance. It follows rules. Breakers trip. Circuits isolate. Safety systems activate. Feelings do not matter to a transformer. By sunset, the neighborhood glowed orange beneath the fading heat while sprinklers clicked across lawns in perfect suburban rhythm. Diane drove slowly past my house again in her Tesla, probably expecting another argument or complaint. Instead, I just waved from the driveway while tightening the final bolts on the inverter cabinet. Her expression shifted immediately. Confusion first, then suspicion. Predators get nervous when prey stops reacting normally. Around 8:30 that night, another violation notice appeared taped to my mailbox. Unauthorized exterior modifications pending immediate review. I did not even bother opening it. I already knew the real meeting would happen around 3 in the morning beside the utility corridor. The house felt unnaturally quiet after midnight. Chloe was back at her mother's place. Walter's garage lights across the street had gone dark hours earlier. Even the cicadas seemed quieter than usual. Only the low hum from the battery wall remained, steady and mechanical beneath the floorboards. I sat in the kitchen with the security feed open on my laptop, while warm summer wine-tapped branches softly against the backyard fence. Then came the alert. 2:47 a.m. unauthorized external draw detected. I looked at the camera feed, and there she was. Diane moved faster tonight, almost impatient. White Tesla backed into position, extension cable in hand, HOA master key glinting beneath the security lights. She did not even look nervous anymore. That was the dangerous stage, when criminals stop feeling cautious because they think repeated success means immunity. The charging connector snapped into place with a faint metallic click. Immediately, the inverter downstairs changed pitch. The low hum sharpened into a strained electronic whine that vibrated through the walls like distant machinery under pressure. Power draw climbed hard. 40 amps. 50. 58. Diane leaned casually against her car, scrolling through her phone, while my battery reserves drained across the monitor. Then the warning banner appeared in bright red letters. External load instability detected. Diane never saw it, because she could not see my monitor from outside. But I could, and I also saw what came next. System protection mode armed. I leaned back slowly in the dark kitchen while the inverter fans roared louder beneath the house. Somewhere outside, hot wind rattled the fence line. Then I smiled, because for the first time since Diane Holloway started stealing from me, the system was finally ready to answer her back. The first thing that happened was the sound. Not an explosion, not sparks flying through the night like some Hollywood movie. Just a deep metallic thunk from inside the inverter room beneath the house. The kind of heavy mechanical sound industrial systems make right before they protect themselves from somebody doing something stupid. My monitoring screen flashed bright red across the kitchen counter. Isolation sequence initiated. Outside, Diane straightened instantly beside her Tesla. Even through the grainy night vision feed, I could see confusion spread across her face. The charging cable disconnected automatically with a hard click loud enough for the backyard microphones to catch it clearly. Then every exterior floodlight around my property snapped on at once. Bright white LEDs flooded the utility corridor, the fence line, and Diane herself standing there frozen in silk jogging clothes with one hand still gripping the charging handle. The sudden light transformed the whole scene from secret midnight theft into something that looked painfully official. The inverter fans downstairs roared louder for 3 seconds before the entire backup grid isolated itself from the external load exactly the way it had been designed to do. Safe, legal, automatic. Diane jerked backward like the system had personally insulted her. Her Tesla screen must have started throwing fault warnings because she rushed toward the driver's side door and climbed inside. I watched her interior lights flicker through the camera feed while the dashboard flashed amber and red across the windshield. Then came a second sound. Beep, beep, beep. Loud warning alarms echoed from inside the Tesla while my monitoring software recorded every second. Unauthorized load event. External tampering. Emergency disconnect trigger. Timestamp secured. The beauty of automated systems is they do not panic. They just follow programming. Diane, on the other hand, absolutely panicked. She jumped back out of the Tesla and yanked at the extension cable hard enough to drag it through the gravel beside the fence. The security microphones picked up every frustrated breath and muttered curse while the floodlights reflected harsh white across her face. Then she made the mistake that changed everything. Instead of leaving, Diane marched straight toward my inverter room access panel beside the garage. I sat perfectly still in the dark kitchen, watching her use the HOA master key against a private electrical cabinet clearly marked restricted access, authorized technicians only. The second the key touched the panel latch, another alert triggered automatically. Unauthorized utility access attempt detected. That alert did not just go to me. It went directly to the utility monitoring contractor tied into the backup system registration. Diane finally realized something was wrong when a second alarm started sounding from the utility box itself. Sharp electronic chirps echoed across the sleeping neighborhood while her Tesla remained stranded in isolation mode halfway beside my fence line. Curtains started moving in nearby houses. Porch lights flickered on up and down the cul-de-sac. I could practically feel the entire neighborhood waking up in confusion. Diane looked around wildly before trying to pull the extension cable free one last time. But the emergency disconnect lock had already engaged inside the charging connector. She could not remove it without resetting the system from inside the Tesla itself. And the Tesla would not reset because the unauthorized draw had triggered a protective shutdown. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. She had spent months abusing a system she did not understand. Now the system was refusing to cooperate with her. 30 seconds later, another set of lights appeared at the far end of the street. Utility response vehicle. White truck. Flashing amber roof bar. Right behind it came a county patrol SUV rolling slowly toward the utility corridor entrance. Diane froze completely when she saw them. Even through the camera feed, I could see the exact moment arrogance turned into fear. She looked toward my dark house one last time, probably expecting me to come outside yelling or threatening or making a scene. But I stayed exactly where I was. Quiet. Calm. Watching the monitors glow blue across the kitchen while the smell of overheated electronics slowly faded from the vents. Because the truth is, I did not need revenge anymore. Diane Holloway had just documented her own misconduct under floodlights, security cameras, utility logs, and automated system reports. The system did exactly what it was built to do. It protected itself, and in the process, it exposed her. By sunrise, Willow Creek Estates already felt different. You could sense it in the silence. No lone cruz. No yagios. No cheerful suburban small talk drifting across driveways. Just quiet tension hanging in the hot Texas air, like everybody knew something ugly had happened during the night, but nobody wanted to say it out. Loud yet. Diane's Tesla still sat crooked beside the utility corridor when I stepped outside around 7 in the morning. Morning sunlight reflected harshly across the windshield, while the charging fault warnings continued blinking weakly on the dashboard. The extension cable remained locked in place exactly where she had left it. A county utility truck idled nearby, diesel engine rumbling softly while 2 technicians reviewed system logs on rugged tablets. The smell of hot asphalt and electrical insulation lingered faintly around the fence line. Diane stood beside the patrol SUV wearing oversized sunglasses even though the sun had barely cleared the rooftops. She looked exhausted, angry too, but mostly embarrassed. That was new. People like Diane survive on appearances. The moment those crack, everything underneath starts collapsing fast. One of the utility investigators waved me over when I walked down the driveway. "You Jack Mercer?" he asked. I nodded. He turned the tablet toward me, showing pages of time-stamped load records and automated alerts from my backup system. "Your monitoring setup reported repeated unauthorized overnight power draws over the last 6 weeks." He scrolled farther. "And somebody attempted access to a restricted electrical cabinet during a fault isolation event." Then he looked over at Diane, standing beside her Tesla. "That generally becomes a legal problem." Diane immediately stepped forward with that polished HOA voice she always used during meetings. Calm, controlled, fake concern wrapped around every word. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said. "As HOA president, I was conducting infrastructure inspections related to community energy safety." The investigator stared at her for a full 2 seconds before asking the most beautiful question I had heard in months. At 2:47 in the morning, even the patrol deputy looked away, trying not to smile. Diane's expression tightened instantly. She started talking faster after that, mentioning community authority, emergency access rights, neighborhood standards. The problem was none of that matched the footage, the utility logs, or the unauthorized load reports sitting right there on the screen. Facts have a nasty habit of surviving people's excuses. Within another hour, the rest of the HOA boards started arriving one by one after hearing about the utility response vehicles parked outside my house. Watching them realize what Diane had actually been doing was almost surreal. These were the same people who approved every violation notice she ever sent me. The same people who nodded silently through every complaint about my unsafe electrical modifications. Now they stood in the morning heat staring at screenshots of Diane secretly charging her Tesla from the solar system she publicly called a neighborhood hazard. Walter Briggs walked over carrying coffee around 8:30 and nearly choked laughing when he saw the board members gathered beside the utility trucks. "Well," he muttered beside me, "looks like community harmony finally arrived." Diane heard him and snapped immediately. This neighborhood would have standards if people like him followed rules. She pointed directly at me while her voice climbed louder. His system caused this entire situation. The utility investigator slowly lowered his tablet and looked at her like she had personally exhausted him. "Ma'am," he said carefully, his system worked exactly as designed. It identified unauthorized external power use and isolated safely. Then he paused. That is the opposite of the problem. You could almost hear the entire neighborhood shift at that moment, because suddenly I was no longer the blue-collar electrician with weird equipment in his garage. I was the homeowner whose legally permitted backup system had exposed repeated utility theft by the HOA president herself. By noon, rumors spread through Willow Creek faster than summer wildfire. Curtains moved constantly. People gathered in driveways whispering, while county investigators photographed the utility corridor and copied security footage from my cameras. Diane spent most of that time sitting inside her Tesla, making phone calls with the windows rolled up tight. Around 1:30, a tow truck finally arrived. The same woman who spent 6 months threatening homeowners over visible work vehicles now stood helplessly watching her own car get loaded onto a flatbed under county authorization. The irony smelled sweeter than fresh rain on hot concrete. As the truck pulled away, Diane looked directly at me from across the street. Her sunglasses could not hide the fury in her face anymore. But for once, there was something else underneath it too. Fear. Because deep down she finally understood the one thing arrogant people never believe until it is too late. Systems remember everything. 2 weeks later, Willow Creek Estates looked like somebody had quietly replaced the air inside the neighborhood. The tension was gone. No more violation notices taped to mailboxes at sunrise. No more slow Tesla patrols crawling through the subdivision like a suburban police state. Even the HOA meetings changed. People actually spoke now. Loudly. It turned out Diane Holloway had spent years convincing everyone they were isolated targets. Once the utility investigation became public, neighbors started comparing stories for the first time. Selective fees, fake safety complaints, unauthorized access notices. One retired couple discovered she had been charging them landscaping penalties for bushes that were technically outside their own property line. Another homeowner found out Diane issued architectural violations using outdated HOA codes that had expired 3 years earlier. The deeper people looked, the uglier everything became. The smell of fresh paint drifted through the neighborhood one Saturday morning while maintenance crews removed the old HOA office signage beside the community pool. Diane resigned before the board could formally vote her out. According to Walter Briggs, she tried blaming the entire situation on system confusion and technical misunderstandings. That phrase became a running joke around Willow Creek. Every time somebody forgot trash day or parked crooked near the curb, somebody else would mutter technical misunderstanding under their breath. The funniest part was what happened to my solar system afterward. Suddenly, half the neighborhood wanted consultations. The same people who once stared at my panels like they were alien technology now knocked on my door asking about battery, backups, and utility savings. Funny how quickly opinions change when fear disappears. Most evenings after work, I would sit in the garage with the door open while the inverter hummed steadily against the back wall and warm Texas wind rolled through the cul-de-sac, carrying the smell of cut grass and barbecue smoke. Chloe started helping me again on weekends, organizing tools and labeling new storage cabinets while pretending she was my assistant engineer. One night, she looked at the battery wall, glowing soft blue in the dark garage, and smiled. "You know what the crazy part is?" she asked. "What?" "You never actually fought her." I leaned back against the workbench for a second, listening to the quiet, mechanical rhythm of the cooling fans. "Sure I did." Chloe shook her head. "No, you just let the truth corner her." That stayed with me, because she was right. I never screamed at Diane, never threatened her, never sabotaged anything. I just documented reality and gave her enough room to keep making bad decisions until the system itself exposed her. That is the thing arrogant people never understand. They think power means controlling others. Real power is understanding how consequences work before everybody else does. About a month after the investigation closed, I installed one final upgrade beside the garage. A matte black steel enclosure mounted beneath the solar monitor with bright reflective warning letters across the front. Authorized access only. Below that sat a smaller line in white text. System protection active 24 hours. Walter nearly spilled his coffee laughing when he saw it. Little dramatic, Jack. I shrugged. I work in electrical safety. We like warning labels. That night, just after sunset, I stood alone in the driveway, watching the last orange light fade across the solar panels overhead. The inverter hummed softly behind the garage wall, while the battery reserves charged quietly for another night. Peaceful, stable, predictable again. Exactly what I wanted when I moved here. Across the street, Diane's old house sat dark and empty beneath the streetlights. No Tesla, no clipboard. No fake authority hiding behind neighborhood rules. Just silence. And honestly, silence sounded beautiful. Because justice does not always arrive with sirens or courtroom speeches. Sometimes it arrives through timestamps, security footage, and a system that simply refuses to lie for anybody.